What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Evening Alpha. I'm your host, Todd Wanish, 26-year veteran of the comic and animation fields, and now Web3. You just start, it's just like notches on the bedpost. You just kind of keep marking them, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, the streets are littered with dead companies. It's fine. Everything's good. We have something really special tonight. Tonight's guests, I've known for a little while now. They're what can I say about these guys? I will say that first, they're some of the most genuine people in the space that I've ever met, and they're also highly intelligent. We've had many conversations privately in the past, so I think tonight's going to be really fun because we've done this before many times. So it's just going to be hanging out with old friends and talking about Web3 and learning more about their project and what they're working on and what the next steps are. I am super excited to introduce you guys to Steve and Belshie Bits from Eternity Complex. What's up, guys?
G'day, how are you?
Hey,
man.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely, man. So, guys, first question we always ask, what is Eternity Complex?
Yeah, thanks. Good question. Eternity Complex is a sci-fi project. It started, I'm a writer, creator, illustrator, and have been creating characters and writing stories in my own time as for fun for myself for a long time. And when NFTs came along, I saw them as a way of bringing all my characters and stories to the world. And so that's what started Eternity Complex, the NFT project. And putting it all together, I realized I'm not going to be able to do this by myself at all, and I needed good, fun people around me to help put it together. I met Belshie through Boss Logic Universe, and we just were chatting and knew he was in the space for real, wanted to work in the space and loved it, and asked him to come on.
Awesome.
Yeah. And in that conversation, Steve and I, he discussed what he wanted for the project, and it fit with like what I believe the space should be going. It wasn't really where the space was at. And so it was definitely a great challenge I wanted to be a part of, and definitely hasn't been easy. Steve and I really work hard to do what's best for the project and for the community that we're building. And so we're just really excited for opportunities like this where we get to talk about it, because Eternity Complex is, something that is more in line with what you're doing over at Adult Fantasy. And so I think that's why we've had such a great conversation over and over again, is because, our belief about the space kind of align.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth, and this is something that I think about a lot, and part of me, I'm really interested to hear you guys think about this, because I'm also very sensitive. We're all independent people and we have our own thoughts and we all have egos and stuff like this. But my personal sense, and again, this could be, I'm willing to admit, it could totally be just like ego. But my personal sense is that, moving into the storytelling side of Web3, where you're actively making a conscious decision to build a universe from scratch with all of the complexity of what that entails, because it's not like a regular comic or animation universe where that's 100,000 things you have to figure out. This is that plus Web3, right? Am I wrong in thinking that like the storytelling side of Web3 is one of the more complex sides of trying to build a project?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think it is because exactly like what you said, right? You've got the story in itself that you've got to figure out. You're building a world, which means creating characters, creating the world that they live in, the culture that they're part of, the languages that they speak or slang that they speak, all the things that come along with creating that universe, the rules, the law, everything. And then you've got to try and figure out how to, potentially, if you don't have a coder who's already interested in your project, you've got to figure out how to code, how to bring it to Web3, how to integrate your Web2 assets or your print assets with your Web3, and how that all fits together to make a cohesive thing that's not going to fall apart on you, which is something that Belshie and I talk about a lot.
All the time. Like Steve said, we met over at Boss Logic Universe, and Boss Logic had an old team that really pushed just the Web3 part of it. And Boss was trying to get the story going. And right now he's kind of flopped it, right? Now he's really focusing on the characters, the story, really building the IP into something. And, I think that's what Steve started really well with Eternity Complex, is that he kind of already came with a lot of that already there. And so that story aspect I think is fundamental. I don't think there are a lot of projects with good story, and they think that it can be this afterthought of like, oh, it'll come later. And they're realizing how difficult that can be if you've already fundamentally put out a Web3 type project. You can't just, oh, well, I'm just going to throw this story in, because it's either going to just be crap, or it's going to be so complex that people just don't understand where you're coming from. And so there's like this fine balance of things.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think to that, like, there's so many good projects out there, like legitimately good projects. But even with those projects, or a number of them, it's sort of like the storytelling aspect is, so I've used this term, I didn't invent it, but I've used it for years and years, called pilling the dog, which is that when you pill it, when you have a dog, let's say you have a pet dog, and the dog needs to take a heart pill or medicine. Well, if you just give the dog the pill, the dog will avoid it and not eat it. But if you wrap it up in cheese or something yummy, the dog will gobble it up, right? So it's giving them what they need wrapped in something that they want, right? And I find that the phase that we're in inside of Web3, inside of NFTs, is in that want phase as opposed to that need phase, right? So you have these top tier projects who, many of them talk about storytelling and building universes, and a lot of them have already been out for well over a year now. And to this day, if you ask me to actually tell you the story of their project or what the universe is about, I could not tell you, right? Because the storytelling is the most important part, but I think it always has a danger of being less sexy than the launches, than the new products, than hey, we've got a dozen, some of these companies now have like dozens of launches under their belt, right? But again, if you ask me what their story is about, I'd be like, I don't know. I mean, I bought the thing, but I don't actually understand what like, I think it's a very difficult thing, because you have to kind of play both sides of the fence. Like, we know that storytelling is the most important part. Without that, you have no character, right? Like, you don't have the universe. But that has to be managed against what the community or what the general public at large wants, which is next new big shiny object, right?
Right. And so in our conversations, we talk a lot.
I even think about like branding.
There's a delay.
Oh no, sorry. I was just going to say, when you think about branding, there's a delay. Sorry. When you think about branding and everything and commercials, everything you watch is a story in some sense. What do they want to tell you? That's what's happening. Like, you go to some perfume commercial, what kind of story are they trying to tell you? If you're going to a car commercial, what kind of story are they trying to tell you? So even if people are like, oh yeah, but like what I have is just like this brand, it's just like this thing. It's like, yeah, but who are you? Like, what are you? Like, what is your purpose behind what you're selling? And why do you have a community? And how are you going to portray that information to them? All of it is story in one form or another. It's just a matter of how do you portray that story. I just wanted to put that out there.
No, 100%.
Yeah, that's it, right? All of it is story. And if you go into advertising, or if you've ever been in advertising, it's exactly that. Perfume ad is really, most of them are just, if you use this fragrance, you'll get the girl or guy and you'll be sexy as hell. But
story of my life.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I love fragrance. But we talk about it all the time. Like I was saying, right? We talk about how we can how does everything we want to do with Web3 fit in with the story we're telling?
Yeah.
So Arcturium, our free mint now, right, isn't just an NFT to get people to come and be part of the project and give them something free. Arcturium is part of the story. It fits in with the lore and the universe that we have. And in our universe, Arcturium is mined from the center of planets, and it's used to base the currency arc within the world and the story, and our characters will use it. One of our main villains is trying to get as much of it as he can, and all this kind of stuff, right? So everything that we bring to our audience as far as NFTs and Web3 is then taken back into the story we're telling, because we want it to all be mixed and fit together.
Steve, do you, as an artist, and for those that may be just joining us, like that's your artwork on your screen, right? Like that's your handiwork. So
that's right.
Do you find it difficult to kind of do the tap dance or the balance between being the artist and sort of the creative lead, and then also jumping onto the other side and managing the business side as well? Like, are you the way in which you guys work, do you just kind of like, are you siloed off where you're just focused on the artwork and sort of the core concept, and then other, like the rest of the team is kind of handling business, or are you kind of finding that you're wearing different hats?
Yeah, definitely wearing different hats. It's like a startup, right? Or any small business, anyone who's starting out to build something big, you're wearing a lot of hats. We're all wearing a lot of hats. Like Belshie does some design stuff to help communicate. I also do some of that stuff. I do the art. I do some of the writing, but we have a writing team. And we're all talking to the community all the time, managing and engaging with people. So like any startup, you're doing everything to build it. And then, I'm sure it'll silo a lot more as we grow. But right now, yeah, definitely doing it all, which is fun as well.
Fun and exhausting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm always interested because, I think that from a general public perspective, outside looking in, you see a website with a cool concept with some good art, and they mint on some day, and you go to the Discord and the Discord magically grows, right? It's magic. There's already X number of people there, and like, holy crap, I'm late to the party. And then the mint happens, and all of this stuff, I think from the outside looking in, seems organic, or like it just happens. And one of the things that I'm so interested in exploring with teams is, one, we know that that's not true, right? Like this is like blood, sweat, and tears, slamming your face against the keyboard type of work. It's all the time. Like you're up, you're working, it's all the time. And so from that perspective, like what are some of the ways that you've been, like, in terms of marketing, like what are some of the ways you've actually been able to get the word out about the mint, especially the one that you're doing now? Like what have you found that has really worked to kind of bring that attention in a way that doesn't require, legit blood?
Yeah, well, I've got my altar over here, and it's got my my firstborn lying on it already. So, aside from going into details around the blood sacrifices I've made, the best thing that's worked so far is talking to people like yourself. Talking to other founders, collaborating. Which Belshie can talk more on because he's really good at that stuff. But also, what's grown us the most recently has been our free mint and using premint.xyz. I think that has brought a lot of legitimacy to what we're offering to people, and especially in the market as it is now, we're offering our story and our NFTs to a community that is risk averse, which is good, because a few months ago people were just jumping into everything, but aren't doing that right now. And especially if you don't already have a big name, you aren't a published author or hugely famous influencer or whatever, offering something that is really easy to come in on, but you can show value at the same time, right? That's what's worked for us at the moment.
Awesome. What do you think, Belshie? I know he's got that delay.
Is he, or is he? I think he might have frozen.
He might be frozen. He's having internet issues. It's okay. It's totally fine. He might be catching up.
He might be.
Okay, we'll give him another minute. So Eternity Complex is a sci-fi NFT project, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How are you going about building such a big universe? Like, so for context, one of the things that we do with our group is we have this thing called lore games, and Thursday night we do like a live session where we're just transparent and open, and we're crafting kind of these big sweeping points across time within the greater universe, right? As we develop other games that kind of are more local and more focused on the current period of time, we're trying to also create this big thing. So how do you guys go about it? Is it community generated, or like what's your insights into that?
It's not community generated. We're thinking about some community generated things because I'm part of a couple of projects that are going down that road. They want to have a very highly involved community regards to story. But I've been putting together these characters and stories probably for the last 10 odd years, and building them out in all different ways. Some of them started out as short stories. Some of them are literally just a sketch of a character, but I've always had the idea of where it could go in my head. Some of them are novels. Some of them are screenplays. But then bringing it to Eternity Complex, and my stories have always had a sci-fi twist to them, whether it's minor or major. But bringing it to Eternity Complex, I then thought about how it could all be interconnected. And then so some of the stories that I wrote were altered a little so that they could fit into the universe better in a more interesting way. And I was doing that by myself, but then I always would use people as sounding boards, right? And one of those people was my younger brother, Blaney, or Hollier Eagle, he's known as on Discord. And he, as I was putting this together, I knew I needed Belshie, and I knew because I was so focused on art and that was going to be a big part of the project with NFTs, I needed someone to help me write. So I went to my brother and said, hey, this is the project, this is what I'm doing. You've read some of these stories already, but this is where we want to take it into this bigger universe with NFTs. And I explained a little bit about what NFTs were, and he grabbed onto the concept. And then we would just brainstorm all the time about this character and that character and how it could fit and how the timeline was going to fit together, because the story actually spans thousands of years, right? So we start at one point, which is our year zero, and it goes into the future and potentially into the past and into other galaxies and things like that. So I would brainstorm with him, and we would just talk about characters, and sometimes it would be highly focused on small little details about one little part, and other times it would be, sweeping ideas about the whole universe and what teleportation means in that universe. Are we going to have faster than light travel? Is it going to be a warp drive? Are we going to have warp technology? Who's going to have it first? All that kind of stuff, which is like really the fun part about storytelling before you get down to the nitty gritty of actually going one word at a time. But yeah, so just brainstorming. So it's probably similar to what you're doing, right? You coming together and just thinking about ideas.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the other thing that attracts me to your project, to Eternity Complex, is that I personally can relate to having something in the old noggin and kind of having it develop or sit there in the back of your mind or on the shelf for a long time, right? And so it's impressive it's impressive that you've had this idea for a while, and you have been working on it sort of religiously over the course of time, even before Web3, right?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the characters in adult fantasy, some of those characters I've had since high school, right?
Yeah, cool.
So these were just like fun things that, you know, you look back and you're like, man, that drawing sucks, you know, like, and then the adult kind of kicks in and you're like, well, maybe I can actually make this a cool character and kind of fix it up a little bit. So I find it fascinating that sometimes, you know, sometimes a concept or an idea will grab a creator's attention, or sort of that muse kicks in, and for whatever reason you don't let go of it, and you just kind of start to dog at it, and you start to whittle away at this mountain, because it really is a puzzle. It's a massive puzzle that you have to figure out how to unlock, especially if, like, again, one of the things that I think from an audience perspective, that may not be so clear is, especially because the word gets thrown around a lot, is the word universe. Like, oh, we're just creating a universe. It's like, yeah, like what people, the real people who are actually doing it, and like you guys who have actually put time in to craft it, you know, forming a universe is not forming a character or forming a team, right? You're creating the entire thing that these other tiny little things sit within, and it's a much larger challenge than just coming up with, like, I don't know, a PFP project that's like, you know, animal of the week or something, you know.
It is a big challenge.
I mean, I think that's a lot of like what other people that don't understand, if they haven't helped like in the background or in the foreground of like some of these projects, they don't understand how a lot of work goes into a story, a character, a team, into bringing in this so that an audience can really enjoy it. And so sometimes I think creators, you know, when I've been in there, I have a lot more respect for creators when they're like, you know, give me some time. I need to work on this before I can kind of present it to the community. You know, there's a lot of the wins, right? And the creator is like, I want this to be right. Like, I want to make sure that all these pieces are fitting together. And that's a huge respect that I have for Steve, you know, because he'll come and he'll ask, like, does this feel right? Does this seem right? You know, what are you attached to? What do you like? Because as a creator, he's like trying to make that right. He's trying to make all those pieces that you talk about, Todd, like really come together and it be enjoyable for a multitude of people.
Yeah. Do you guys ever feel like do you guys ever sit there like and say like, why did we not just launch 10,000 happy hippos?
Sometimes, but not every time.
Belshie has a great idea.
As much as that's the easy way. Yeah. Oh yeah. Horny hamsters. That's mine.
Oh, that's a good one.
I always talk about like, okay, let's do horny hamsters. It has a good breeding project. You know, the activity of the week is they can get on a wheel and just, you know, run on the wheel. You know, horny hamsters is always the one I go to. I have a list.
Nice.
And Belshie,
Nice.
You'll be happy to know that you and I think a lot alike. We've got jerkin giraffes. We've got playful primates. We've got pleasure pachyderms.
Yeah.
You know, this is the recession. The recession launches are coming soon.
That's right. Coming soon.
Yeah.
Breeding projects for everybody. You'll have as many NFTs as you want. So how? Okay, so you guys have a mint going on right now, or is it about to launch? Like what's happening right now in the world of Eternity Complex?
Yeah, we got our registration for Arcturium going on right now. So the mint's not live yet. We've got a couple of collabs to go through. One of them is with Adult Fantasy, and we're just having people register. So you can jump on, register for the free mint of Arcturium. And that's going on right now. We've had a great response. I'm super stoked about how enthusiastic people have been about the free mint. I know it's a free NFT, but it's an awesome chance for people to actually get in and look at what we're doing and the amount of work we've already put in. I mean, you can see here behind me, there's our website. These are our characters that we've got, and you can go through and read those character scenes already. So it's really good to have this free mint. One, it gives us value to give to people, and two, it's getting people to know what we're doing, and I love that. But and there are 4 different types of Arcturium that have different rarity, which is really cool. I'm excited about it.
Awesome. Really quick, I'm going to jump in. Oh, go ahead, Belshie, go for it.
No, I was just going to say that what I would want people to understand. I've been on a lot of projects. Like, we're like building in the value ahead of time. We know secondary markets, they'll determine what something's worth based on what we're doing. But you know, Steve's putting a lot of time into the illustrations, a lot of time into the story. We're thinking of very Web3 kind of ways to share the story, as well as traditional ways. But we're also, you know, Arcturium isn't the only thing. We already have almost locked and loaded, ready to go, right? We have the Arcturium, we have Gen Zeros. We already launched our Vici Founders, which is like our elite Genesis project that we, or mint that we did a few months ago for our early investors in the project. And we've already kind of are building these different building blocks that when they come together, people will realize it's a lot more than just the, you know, the horny hamsters and the primal primates and, you know, all the other things that have been out there. Like, we really want people to, if it's your thing, right? Like, one, if you like the Web3 stuff we're doing, there's a place for you. If you love cyberpunk, sci-fi kind of feel and stories, then we've got a lot for you. A lot of things that we can unpack to really make it enjoyable for you. We know it's not for everybody, and we respect that. And, you know, we're not here to say that this is for everybody, but if you come and give us a chance and read the characters and read the Vici founder lores, you're going to really fall in love with what Steve and the writing team has already put together to kind of get you into the world.
No, that's awesome. Really quick, I just want to give a shout out to everybody in chat. Let's see, we've got Willie D is here. What's up, Willie? Welcome. Rageous is here. What's up, man? How you doing? Carrots, what's up? Welcome. We've got Wizards popping in, asking about the reveal. Bad Kitty, hi Bad Kitty, happy Friday. Massive is around, LFG, let's go. And Studio 7.62, Avery, what's up, Avery? How you doing? And Willie D also says he's asking, did somebody say blood sacrifice? So, all about the blood sacrifice. So
yeah.
So in terms of like the mint and what's happening, like how are you rolling out this? How do you guys approach rolling out such a big thing? Because you have, to your point, Belshie, you know, you guys you're kind of putting out all these the building blocks, right? And admittedly, it's a lot of moving pieces, right? Because you have to keep the larger universe in a context, and then this thing that we're launching, where does that fit into the broader universe, and what are the things that surround the thing that we're launching inside of this universe? Like for us, we are, you know, we did an Ashcan mint yesterday with a mint pass. We're launching Origin Comics. Yep. We've got the broader thing with the lore games, and we're also working on kind of local things to develop character and story. Some things that'll be coming out soon. But like, how do you guys like? Is there? I guess the question is like, is there some kind of, I don't want to say roadmap because that's such an overused term, but is there like a mind map that you guys have or something where you're like, okay, here's the universe, and the first thing that we're launching is this piece, right? And so as this piece rolls out, then that'll be associated with a comic or a game or something else that starts to build the actual action foundation of the world. Does this make sense? Like how are you guys moving out into actually papering this universe?
Yeah. So what we're going to do is Arcturium is the first thing that we're going to drop, right? It didn't start this way. We actually were going to kind of go about it a little bit different way, but in order to meet the market and meet kind of new sentiment within the market, we decided to bring out Arcturium, which fit into the story and something we were kind of do later on. It just felt more natural to bring out Arcturium, which will be attached to Arc, which is a token, a utility token within our own project. And so it will then be connected to our Gen Zeros, which are our characters that Steve so nicely displayed. They'll be kind of a collection of those characters, which will then lead into the kind of events that we want to put in. We're calling them events. They're basically interactive ways to get the community involved with the characters on a little bit more intimate level, that will open up other reward opportunities and other things like that to help the community be engaged with the story that Steve and his team has put together to kind of help them understand what's going on. Because we're going to release the story in a form of series, almost like a TV series that comes out. You know, you can binge watch the entire thing, right? Or you can watch them in these little different series. We feel like for Web3, releasing them in these series is a really good addition where people can read part of the story, and then we're going to release another part of the story a little bit later on. And in between, have these events that all these other pieces kind of all interconnect and really bring it all together. And then at the end of it, we'll release the entire novel in its entirety in a form of an ebook. And we're going to have like different types of digital covers and a limited like physical copy release, where if people want a physical copy of the book, there'll be a limited edition of that. But I'll let Steve fill in if I missed anything.
No, yeah, that was really good. That was a really good overview of sort of where we're headed. But also what I wanted to add to that was that, like some of our, you know, most beloved movies and TV series and franchises, they start from the written word, right? So I've done a lot of filmmaking, done a lot of video production, and the ultimate goal is to get there. But I know that we're not there yet, and our audience is, and where I am, it takes a lot of money to do anything as grand, especially in science fiction, as a film or a TV series, right? But I know we can write good stories, and we can write a good novel because I've been writing myself. I have my brother now, and we've also got another writer on our team, Tori, who is adding another aspect to the writing and the characters that is really valuable. And so we can bring these stories to people now rather than waiting 4, 5, up to 10 years for a film or something like that. We can start the franchise and start building the universe in the written word right now. And one of the big things we talked about a lot with our NFTs and our project is how do we integrate the written word and the story that we're telling into NFTs. And that's where the serialized part of it came in. We can release the first part of the story, and what happens in that first part, we can have this event. And let's say, for example, this is not a spoiler, this is just an example that we use all the time. Let's say in this first part, at the end, the climax, one of the characters dies. And we go, okay, everyone who holds this character can now, if they want to, choose to swap out their NFT or exchange their NFT / burn it for a new version of the character, a new form. And that'll give them a new NFT. It'll reduce the number of Gen Zero versions of the old version, the first version, as well as introduce a new one, a more exclusive one. And it marks the event or that part of the story very specifically. So once we move on in the story, that's past and that won't happen again. And so there won't be another opportunity to say, get that NFT, because it'll be a new event, a new part of the story that's going to start rolling out.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's almost, so it's kind of like a key that unlocks that story. And then as as that story is told, that kind of opens the door to the next piece.
In a way, yeah.
Interesting. That's really cool. And I like I like the idea of sort of a serial. I mean, I'm a comic nerd, so of course I'm going to like like a serialized storytelling form. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm totally just making this up, but like I would also think that by releasing pieces of the story in a serialized prose form, because of the speed at which you can do it, it also allows for feedback and iteration, right? So you get to put that piece of the story out there, that chapter or what have you, and then have the audience check it out, review it, and if there are questions or anything that the audience comes up with, then you have the opportunity to kind of use that as like a second draft, right? Is that something that's considered, or is that like not even something you worry about?
To an extent, yes. Well, one of the things we considered deeply is how to release it in a serialized form, and also have it be one piece that fits together at the end, right? So if you write a novel, you write it start to finish, and you go back to the start and rewrite things, because as you've written your first draft, you change things and you come up with the new ideas, right? And so you've got to then adjust the start so that it all fits together. If we're going to release the start to the audience,
right,
we can't do that. So we were like, okay, well, what we have to do is do really, really detailed plot for the whole story and for each episode, really detailed, like a TV series would, right? They would plan out everything, and then they would, shoot it, release,
right.
But they still have to have that. That's why a showrunner works on a TV series, to make sure that there's consistency with the show. So we had to look at it in that kind of context, where we couldn't go back and change the start because we'd already released it to our audience. Having said that, we also know that we're going to pay attention to what the audience resonates with. If they're saying, "Oh, we really love X character," or "We really love this event," or that, or whatever happens, right? We're going to pay attention. Obviously, we're going to like go, "Oh, they love this. Can we adjust? What can we do to give the fans what they're loving?" Because that's an important part. I mean, I love what I love, and I think other people like it too. But if some character is really resonating and we hadn't really planned on maybe doing X when it's been suggested and everyone loves that, we'll look at how we can fit it in, for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah. Like it's such an interesting challenge too, because you're really building in the open too. You know what I mean? Like, unlike film or TV, they get ratings and reviews after the thing drops, right? You're going to get it like in real time, right? Because it's Web3. Like I can tell you, one of the things that's so interesting about this is like, when we first started Adult Fantasy, so the character design, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do Venture Brothers meets 90s X-Men. So there was seriousness in the mission of building a universe and building a character franchise, but I wanted the characters to have sort of a comedic, humorous take, right? That's my background, and I thought that was like really inside of crypto and NFTs. There's a lot of humor in some of those projects, like CryptoPunks and Bored Ape and all that. And so some of these characters are ridiculous. Like we have a character called Heinous, which is the people that like Heinous are incredibly passionate about Heinous. The people that don't like him, like, do not talk about him, don't want to see him. You know what I mean? It's definitely like, it's one of those. It's a great character, I think, because it's a polarizing thing. But what surprised me is that I initially imagined the stories would be like Adventure Brothers meets 90s X-Men, like kind of weird and kind of funny and like it could be a show on Cartoon Network, right, or Adult Swim. And what's ended up happening as we do these lore games, as we're getting input some of these stories are like damn serious, and like they're getting like really dark and like Macbethian and like very Shakespeare. You know, you're like, what is happening? Like, and it's creating sort of an interesting dynamic where on the surface the characters may look a little humorous, but the way they got to look like that, or the way they became that, has some really dark undertones. Like, you know, all of a sudden it's like,
Yeah.
you know, 1986 Watchmen, or, you know, Dark Knight Returns, like some of the darker side of comics and television and stuff. It's very interesting.
I love it. I love that. That's really cool.
It's really interesting how a community can influence what was already there. You know what I mean? I find it fascinating. You know, like once you bring an audience to it, I think, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too. Like once you have people looking at your work and giving input, it really I think it has the potential to take a project to the next level, because they're going to come up with things you never would have come up with ever. And some of it'll be horrible, and some of it'll be absolutely amazing. You know. Now, Steve, I got another question about art, because I'm looking at the characters you have. Those characters are not generative, right?
No.
So
not here.
So this is another thing that we have in common, and I'm just very curious. How did you come up as a team? How did you guys come up with what I think is a hard decision, which is we're not going to do generative characters. We're going to create X number of characters and then go through the process, because it's way more complicated and way harder, much harder to not only create a character from scratch, but then to create a collection of independent artwork. So I'm curious as to as a team, like, what was that decision? What was behind that decision? And then how do you go about it without burning out?
Yeah, okay. So from the start, I'll go back a bit. Sound like one of those old men telling a story. Well, it first started in 1945 when I picked up a penny. No, it first started in May last year with Gary Vee introducing NFTs and VFriends, right? And I saw what he was doing, and I knew that, I think I mentioned this, but I knew that's how I was going to bring my characters to people. And I was seeing a lot of the generative art, and while I'm part of generative projects and I see the value in it, I knew that wasn't going to work for me in the way that it took the individuality away from the characters I was creating. So like Callista here, or Dorian, or Knight, any of the characters, they are not a copy of each other. And so I wanted to make sure that if you got Dorian as when you minted, that you knew you had Dorian. You didn't think it couldn't be anyone else. So the generative, so the artwork was, so the NFTs my idea was that the NFTs would be the characters, and there would be value, there'd be story behind it, and there would be a purpose, like with collecting cards or with collecting comics, that you got Dorian or you got Callista or any of the characters, and that was the value, not the rarity behind whether it was a pink shirt or a green shirt or a crown or whatever. And I'm definitely not putting that down, because I find value in other projects that I've collected with those things, right? I just knew that wasn't going to work with what I had already been working on. My characters was my thing, but what I do recognize is that the generative side of thing is fun, and like I said, I like it in other projects. And so what we are doing is we're bringing bringing rarity to our Gen Zeros, and we're bringing some generative aspects with backgrounds and foregrounds. So I've created a whole bunch of foregrounds and a whole bunch of backgrounds that will go with our characters. And there are going to be some one-of-one NFTs. So there's like, I think you would, if you're on our socials on Twitter and things like that, you'll see the pencil drawings, pencils in brackets because they're done digitally, but the pencil drawings I've done of some of the characters in different poses, they're more realistic, different version of the character. They will be there as rare versions of the character, and you can tell it's still the same character, but it's a one of one in the collection.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so when I put the team together, I said, hey, this is how I'm doing it, this is why this, and everyone who's come on is like, yeah, that's cool, I get that. I assume
and the way
Belshie,
I see it is, it's almost like taking that character and just putting it in a new scene of a show, of a movie, of like a comic, right? Like that's the generative part, is the scene around that character. The character is created by Steve, and you'll know that you have that character. But what the generative aspect we want to give is kind of like that scene around that character is a pretty good way of explaining it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I do think that's for the few teams that decide to do non-generative characters, I think it always draws my attention, because you're instantly making a statement against what is, I think, is almost a peer pressure to fall into like what is already out there and kind of accepted, right? The easy choice is to be like, well, we kind of make fun of the animal PFPs or whatever, but that's because they're all animal PFPs. Like, it's like you know that there are teams that have some brilliant concepts. They might have just like tremendous utility and all-star rock star teams, but when they get to that NFT, they're like, I don't know, have they done beavers yet? Like, what about muskrats? Has anyone done a muskrat? Like, they're trying to find like the next animal or something because there's such a pressure to sell. And so I think it's a real testament when you say, nah, fuck that. We're gonna, there's a reason why we're sticking to independent characters and individual characters, because they're characters, right?
Right.
So
we're building the IP around the characters. The stories we're telling based on these characters is what is going to make them valuable. But I heard Gary Vee talk a little bit about some of his, I can't remember if it was regrets or things that he would have done differently, right, with VeeFriends Series 1. And he's like, I missed the PFP trend. And he's like, if I was to go back, I would probably do the PFP thing, or I might do it. But then he countered that and said, but all the characters that I've done are my hand drawings, and so that means a lot, blah, blah, blah. So there are, two sides to it. And so I thought of that too, and I think people may not have jumped on Eternity Complex because it's not a PFP, right? It's not an animal. And so that has probably made it a little bit harder for us to gain some traction early on, because it is something different, and it's not something that people can go, oh, it's another PFP and it's X, and so I'm going to go do that because everyone else is doing that. And so that has probably made it harder for us in that way. But I still look at it and go, no, I'm building value. People will see that eventually. They'll see the value.
No, I think you nailed it, man. It is because these NFTs tend to look different. I do think it's a harder sell, because it makes, you're forcing people to think, which is always hard and not wise, but you have to, like, there's no choice, right? Like, it's easy for someone to get caught up in the moment of the next big PFP thing, and it's like, even if it's like, something that has to do with like excrement or something, right? Like there's a whole slew of poo projects that are doing excellent, and you're like, oh, come on, we all know this isn't going to be here in 6 months. But when someone comes to your NFT or your project and the form factor is different, or the characters are all independent, or there's some other symbol or something about the actual shape of the NFT, if it's the minute it's different and it doesn't fit the mold, you're forcing people to stop and make a decision, right? The decision is, do I want to spend the time to learn what the hell it is that I'm looking at, or am I bouncing and going on to the next thing? And I can't speak for other storytelling projects, but I do think that for our project, speaking personally, we, I mean, I don't think, I think we've become, and maybe again, this might be wishful thinking. I don't really know, but it seems so far like we are like flipper repellent, right? Like, which sounds awesome, except, you know, we all love secondary sales. But you know, like it's not the kind of project that you can come in, look at and say, oh, this is the floor price. I'm just going to spit it out and flip it back. Right. And I think one of the reasons it has that hesitancy is because of what you just said, Steve. It's like, because it looks different, because it's not the template that's kind of out there, it doesn't fit the mold. And so people are forced to decide whether it doesn't fit the mold means it's a bad thing or a good thing, right? And the only way to really decide on that is if they actually do their own research, which we all know is almost a meme in itself. Like, go to the website, read what the project is about, go into the Discord, figure it out, go to Twitter, actually look at the project and say, oh shit, these guys are building a sci-fi universe, right? And then once you have them, they really get into it.
And
go for it.
Yeah, and I think what I like about these free projects that are happening right now is that people are actually taking the time to go, oh, well, okay, well, because I'm not spending a lot of money on gas and things like that, they're like, oh, okay, cool. I get to like actually take a second to be like, oh, I like this, because they're kind of minting them and then they're going, oh, I like this project. Oh, I like what they're doing. And they're sharing it. Now it's a word of mouth thing. And you know what I mean? Like, that's what I like about the kind of free mint thing that's going on right now. And that's why Steve and I kind of talked, because we thought, okay, we need to give people an opportunity to actually look at what we're doing without this fear that what their money's getting put into. And I look around the space right now, and that's kind of what free mints is doing. One, it's showing that some of these free mints are the art, the AI generative art is way better than their original.
Yeah.
You know, and so if it's just about the art, you know, in my opinion, you know, it's obviously my opinion on this matter. I'm like, wow, this is a lot better than the old version. But it's also just giving people a time to go, I like this. I like this project. I like this team. I like what they're doing. And it's kind of like this free in. And then they go, like, for your project, Todd, like for Adult Fantasy, they're like, oh, I'm going to go and now get a Genesis NFT because I like this project. Oh, I'm going to go into chat a little bit more often and talk with the people there. And it just starts to like really is like this organic way of like getting into something.
It is really interesting. It's something that I'm, you know, I mean, we're all learning, you know, how to do this. Like, there's no expert in this space, no matter how much they like to claim it. But one of the things that I've learned is that, so the free mint that we just did, we had people come in, and because the barrier to entry was so low, being it's free, like. It's free. Plus, I think we were using a modified version. Melissa, our lead dev, adopted Azuki's 721A smart contract, you know, with the lower gassing. So it was a free mint with even like lower gas. So we had people saying, I minted 97 of them for $3.
It was like $2.
Yeah, it was insane. But one of the things that I found fascinating that I never would have guessed is that we had plenty of people who came in who minted, right? Who said, hey, I got 2, I got 3, I got 4. 1, is that enough? And 2, they were like, I got this. What's the project about? Like, it was, they got in first because it was free. So there's no harm, no foul, right? As long as the site's legit, whatever. And then because they had the thing, then they took a breath and said, I have it. Now, what is this about? And now they're taking the time, I hope, to look at the white paper and all the documentation and all of that stuff. It's really interesting. The free mint, every launch type has its pros and cons, but the free mint definitely has some interesting pros, I think, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I agree, and that's awesome to hear that people are jumping in and then asking what it's about, rather than just waiting to flip it or whatever. I think that's really cool, and that's definitely a huge pro for any project, right? I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How I love hearing this from other creators. Tell me, and you probably got multiple ways of doing it, but how do you come up with your characters? Like
I agree.
in your space, whatever you're doing, you got a new character to come up with. What do you do?
Oh, good question, man. So um, I usually start like something pops into my head, like a shape or a form, and that's the beginning of it. I'm really deep on the character side, so for me, creating a new character is not easy. Everything, the clothes that they wear, the posture, the attitude, the hairstyle, like everything is from the perspective of a character. Everything that makes the character, every visual component, is a result of a historical behavioral something, right? Like the reason I'm wearing a hoodie, the reason I have comics behind me, the reason I have bad posture, like these are results of the things that have occurred inside of my life, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're making a character, you actually, I think you have an obligation to consider that. So creating the shape of the character or the body form is pretty quick. It's like, okay, this character will be little chubby, right? This character will be kind of like me, have a little double neck and, you know, maybe a little beer belly and little, you know, little belly shelf or whatever. And you kind of sketch that out. But then once that shape is there, I say, okay, well, why? Right? Why? What is it? And that's when the character development starts. And sometimes, you know, sometimes it comes out as something humorous, and sometimes it comes out as something serious, and sometimes I don't know what it is. Sometimes it's very easy, and sometimes I have to fight like hell to figure it out. From series 1, the hardest character was the primordial. I don't know, he was the first character I came up with, and I had him in my head, and for whatever reason, I could not get that stupid thing on paper. I couldn't do it. And so I avoided it like the plague. And the way that I avoided it was by trying every other character first, like all of them. Maybe it was like some intimidation, right? Like I was just like, this is supposed to be the big baddie for like kind of like our first big bad guy. And I just, maybe it was intimidation or I wasn't sure what to do. And then I procrastinated by doing all the other characters. I knew he was a big character, and I knew I wanted him to have like some kind of reference to Fantastic Four #1, specifically the cover, which has nothing to do with the inside of the book, but you know, kind of the dawn of comics. I wanted something that kind of referenced a classic Kirby monster kind of thing, and that was it. And then I was like, well, that would be simple. Like it's just a Kirby monster. That's not a problem. And it was ridiculous. And it was the night. Then it was 2 nights before the deadline, meaning I had to get it done. Everything else was done. There was no, like, we were launching in like a week, and I had this one. I just finished the last character and had primordial left, and I had to force myself, and I just like chewed it up. You know what I mean? And finally it just kind of came out. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, like, does that make sense? Like, I really push into the story. You know, it's like,
I can relate.
It has to look like a real person or a real character.
Yeah.
Even if it's ridiculous.
Sure.
Even if it's ridiculous, it has to feel real. What about you?
Yeah, no, I can relate with a lot of those feelings and sentiments about characters, and sometimes nothing pushes creativity more than a deadline, right? And when you're down to the wire, you sometimes just inspired because of the pressure. But definitely when I'm scribbling down a character, I know that I've got X amount of characters to create, and I know that we've got, filling out the story, or, I've written a character called Belx, for example. One of the characters, he was just one of the guys, and there wasn't much backstory or anything else. One of the guys with a voice in a scene that I'd written. And as I'm drawing him, I'm like, okay, he's got, this mech arm. All right, but why does he have a mech arm? And as I'm drawing the details of the machinery and the biomech parts that, adapt to his skin and things like that. All right, it's because he was born this way. And why was he born this way? Well, his mum ate something that was infected, and he was born with the defects. And the government was at fault, and so they put him into this program, which meant that he was able to get mech parts for the rest of his life. But because those mech parts were government issue, they weren't great. And so as a little kid, he had to then modify them and get really good at it. And so he took something that was potentially a weakness and made it his strength. And now he's this whiz kid with mechanics and things like that, and always doing modifications on his body and giving himself a new hand and blah, blah, blah. All while I'm drawing the details of this character, I'm now able to come up with a backstory and add to the world and give him reasons for having these things. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I totally get that. It's a big part of my characters as well. Like, they're dressed a certain way for a reason. They've got, a lot of them have shaved around here. One, it's fashionable, I like it, but two is the feed and VR headsets are popular, are a big thing in one of the worlds, and so they're often strapped around the side, and so they shave their head to get it off the side. Callista here, right? She has this tattoo mark on her cheek, and that's because some of them spend so much time in VR. The early headsets would give them scars along here, and so it then became fashionable to get tattoos along there. As the headsets developed, they no longer gave scars, but they still get the tattoos to mark that they spent a lot of time in VR.
No, that's awesome.
So yeah, love that. Love it.
Yeah, and I'll say the other thing that I do, and this is just from like a old school character design thing, and this is, it's not a rule, it's just something that, because I've been doing it a long time, like, it's just something that's a cheat for myself. It's a starting point. Is I have this rule of threes, which is when I'm coming up with a visual for a character, one of the easy ways to start, it's a pure starting point, it's not a destination, is to start mentally collaging other characters, right? So it doesn't matter where those characters come from, right? Like, if you take one thing from one character and another thing from another known character and another thing from another known character, and you just kind of shuffle them all together, like, all of a sudden you have a really interesting visual, right? And once you kind of have that shape, that basic shape, that putty, then you can kind of start to craft interesting things. And it doesn't work with one character reference. It can sometimes work with two, but for some reason, when you do three, you almost always get a really original looking character, right? And it doesn't matter what it is. You take, like, I'm not even talking humanoid forms. It's like, okay, well, let's take the Baroness from G.I. Joe, and we're going to cross her with Optimus Prime. Okay, so all of a sudden you have a really weird looking character. Like, that's pretty cool. Now, what if we cross that with Garfield? What if we just throw in some Garfield into it, right? And she's like this panther, this all of a sudden she's like this cat panther transforming robot or something. And all of a sudden
it loves
you have
lasagna.
this really weird fucking character design, right? And that can be the starting point. And then as you're creating it, then you're like, well, why the hell does this thing exist? And that's where some of the backstory starts to populate.
That's cool. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's just a lot of meth, really. It's just. But let's see. We've got really quick. Hop back in. We've got Willie D says he's Team Heinous. We got T-Minus in the house. Studio 7.62 is talking musky muskrat, so he's coming up with his own PFP characters.
Nice.
Willie D said that the generative background sounds cool. I agree. I think that's
cool.
That's pretty awesome. What's up, Hype? How you doing? Welcome. Thank you for coming. It's
thank you.
It's really interesting. I'm always fascinated by how people choose to create characters and stories and worlds. I guess what the final thing that I can think of is like, what's your biggest challenge with this stuff? What do you find that's just like is the hardest part about it?
You want to go first, Belsh?
The hardest thing for me is probably, I would say what me and Steve talk about probably the most. There's two things. One, some of it is we have these grand ideas and how we would love to have like an on tab like developer that could teach us if it's possible or not. Like we would love that because we want to do things differently. We're not looking to cookie cutter like what everyone else is doing. We want to do things that fit the story. And so that makes it where we want to do something that's maybe not seen in the space right now. And then the other thing is we just don't trust a lot of the the advertising of projects. We feel like there's a lot of like insider trading type stuff, I guess, is there's just they're using projects to wash money basically and like go through and it just takes advantage of other people. And I don't like that. Like I don't believe in that. I believe in, I know how hard I work for the money I have. I want to respect other people and how hard they work for the money they have. Steve just has a good product in my opinion, and so I want people to know that. I want to help Steve get that word out, and so sometimes it's like, where do you go that you feel safe and it's honest, like advertising of like good projects that are building something great. And I would say those two are probably side by side in the difficulties.
That was that makes a lot of sense.
Getting along with what Belsh said, just adding to that is getting eyeballs, right? It's what everyone wants. It's the age-old thing that all companies, projects, startups, anyone is trying to do is get eyeballs on the thing that you're creating. With NFTs and Web3, I felt like I know the word's used a lot, but the gatekeepers of publishing and film and TV and things like that were what's the right word? We were able to get around them in a way, get to an audience in a different way, and offer value to that audience. But then you still got to be able to get your audience to see what you're doing. And the hardest part, and that's the hardest part, is I believe I have something really great. I've got really good people on my team. I believe in the artwork I'm doing. I'm constantly trying to do better in my artwork and try and do better with my characters and what I'm bringing to it. And it's getting people to see that, getting people to spend the time, I guess, because we're all time poor, right? We're all trying to do our own thing, hustle, create, work, make money, whatever. So it's like making sure that what I'm doing is worth someone's time. And you constantly second guess that when people don't see it, or you don't get the audience that you want. You go, well, is what I'm doing not good enough? I got to do better. I got to make it better. How can I make it better? And how can I get people to see the next better thing that I'm doing? And so I think the hardest part is just getting the eyeballs and making sure that once you do get them, that you're offering them value and that you're doing better in the project, so they stay.
Yeah, I think you guys bring up exactly like brilliant challenges, right? Like one of ours is it's a team thing. I think we all feel it, is that the space moves so fast that we always feel behind, no matter what we launch, no matter how much we launch, no matter how it does. It's always like the market moves before we can launch the plan, and then we have to like change the plan to match the market, and you're like, fuck, like it's like you're chasing this wave, right? It's like the wave comes, it crests, and it just kind of goes out, and then it kind of comes up again, and then it crests and it goes out, and you always find yourself on, like, you know, on either side, but not the actual top. You know what I mean? Like, some people just nail the top. You're just like, okay, they fucking surf that wave really well, man. But the market moves so fast that from a team perspective, and we talk about it internally, is like, you know, sometimes it's me, and sometimes it's Melissa or Flint. Like, it always changes, but on any given Sunday, someone is just like, damn it, sorry guys, I wish I could have moved faster to get this done faster because of XYZ, because of the market. And so I think there's a challenge there to not blame yourself or the team or anybody. It's just the market's going to be the market. And when you get complete and you get ready and you get finished, when you get finished, you know, we all have deadlines and we all have to do our best to meet those deadlines. But as long as you're hitting your milestones and hitting those deadlines, you have to just be super accepting and be willing to be nimble with how you approach that launch, right? Or how it comes out, because it's like all of a sudden, like, you know, the Mint Pass that we just launched, that was originally going to be a paid drop. You know, it was going to be a paid drop. Why wouldn't it be? And then all of a sudden we're like, you know, you're looking at the top 50 projects or whatever in the last, or the top 50 launches in the last, you know, X number of months, and it's all free. Like, there's not one paid project. You're like, okay, well, you know, meeting, hey, all hands, let's talk about this. All of a sudden, you know, the market is completely doing something else. You're like, well, you know, we'll just try to push secondary, or we'll just try to work on the next launch, or whatever it is. We'll just focus on community building and giving people something that they can hopefully find value in, because everybody's hurting. So why not give back to the community? Like, you realize that there are reasons to do the things that you know you need to do based on what the market is telling you, but that doesn't preclude you from feeling that you're always like one step behind. And then, Steve, to your point, I would say the other thing is exactly what you said. It's like the eyeballs and making sure, like, you know, there are. I was talking. I'll put it this way. I just got back from NFT NYC. Like, God, I don't even know when. It feels like a month ago, but I think it was like last week. And I met a guy who, and I'm not going to name names, but I met a guy who was an assistant to a major NFT collector. Right, background in finance. So these guys are like Forex traders, but they're using all the tools, you know, IC tools, Nansen, you name it. They've got all the boards and all the dashboards, looking at the charts. And I was asking him, like, well, how do you guys go about picking your NFTs? How do you go about building your collection? And it was exactly what you would think. Right, they're you know, looking at the metrics, looking at total volume, looking at supply, looking at the balance between total supply and holder count. The stuff, if you've been in the space for any amount of time, it's sort of the baseline that everybody looks at, right? And I argued with him, and not as an argument, but I presented a case where I said, the guy that you work for is going to miss the big things. And my perspective is that projects like ours, and the projects that we talk to, whether it's Eternity Complex or another project working on a film or this or that, or the projects that are moving culture, are not the projects that are going to have massive secondary volume, massive, you know, all of this monetary shit. right? It looks different. Yes, those things can, what makes it hard is that those things can exist. Like you have Bored Ape, obviously, and some other things that do have those features. But speaking for our own project, we're all forced to, like, OpenSea and all these platforms force you to show the same metrics, right? But those aren't our metrics internally, right? Like I always look at secondary volume as a negative force. Secondary volume is pain. It's somebody's pain. It's somebody saying, I don't like your thing, let me sell it. Now it's great for the team because they get a royalty, right? So theoretically, and to your point, Belsh, like you have teams that can motivate pain and push up secondary, right? You can manipulate this stuff very easily, right? But from our perspective, it's, if you're building something long term, then shouldn't the goal be to have people who don't sell and who are embedded in your, like, you can make the same case for massive secondary volume. I can make just as strong a case for a project that has a very strong community and very little trading volume, right? And for the longevity of a project, I would bet on the second one.
Yeah, I heard something recently, and people's what they said is that most people think that when you say community, that it's about community, but really the team, when they say community, they're saying, I want a customer. They're trying to get customers in on their project and not necessarily community. And what kind of project are you? Are you a project that's trying to roll through a bunch of customers, or are you a project that's trying to build a community? You've got to be honest with yourself on what that is. And, your two projects, right, Steve and Todd's, you are trying to build a community. That is what you want. Obviously, the secondary sales are nice and all that kind of stuff. It's needed. It's like a double-edged sword. But your focus is more the community. The reason why is because I know that is because both of you took a paid thing and you turned it into free because you cared more about building your community than you did about getting the money.
Right.
And so most projects need to be honest with themselves. Are you trying to bring in customers, or are you trying to bring in community? That's really what most projects need to be honest with.
I think that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a great point. And I remember you putting that to me, Belsh, when we were discussing. You're like, what are we building here? Customers or community? And it really was, the answer really was community, because I was like, well, my community gets to read my stories, and that's what I want. I want people to love the characters, to love the story that we're building here. And they will or they won't buy an NFT. If they love NFTs, they'll buy one. If not, then whatever. But that led us to then go, well, okay, when we're releasing Arcturium, it's going to be a free mint. But those people that get in on the free mint and hold the Arcturium will eventually get Arc when we do our token, but it'll also be a key to getting the Gen Zeros for free. And that means they'll get the characters. That means they'll get to read it. They'll get to share and find the value in the stories. And we will build the fan base that we want. We want people to love it, love the stories and champion the characters, hate the characters, whatever. But that was it. That was when you put that question, that was what really made me think hard about what we wanted.
Yeah, it's a great way to frame it. That really is a great way to frame it, because that goes to the core of the argument that I proposed to this guy, which is if you're looking at high sell-through count, high holder count, high secondary volume, and high floor price, I said those are fantastic metrics for certain types of projects, right? But by our metrics internally, if you applied that customer metric to our community project, we would look horrible, right? And that's just straight up. Like it would the number, it wouldn't look good. But if you know the project and you're saying, okay, what if instead in those numbers you're like, okay, well our first project the season 1, it was we did 2,200 pieces, right? And we have about a little over 400 holders, right? Now, I think the highest we had was about 420 holders, and I think right now it's about 415, meaning it's consolidated a little bit and it's never dropped, right? And what that means, the reason there's a discrepancy, the reason it's not like this, the magical 50% where you have 2,200 and 1,100 holders, right? Or the 10K PFP drop and the 5,000 holders, right? The magic 50%. That the industry thinks is brilliant. Well, that's great if it's a PFP project, for sure, right? But we're not generative characters. And so in our universe, what we had was we had a bunch of people who came in and then collected them all. So there was consolidation around people multi-buying to get the collection to do what it is that most people say they want, which is buy the collection, right? So if you're looking at a project through the wrong lens, and I think Belshie, you nailed it, which is like one lens is that customer lens, and one lens is the community lens. And you can't put the community lens on the customer lens, and you can't put the customer lens on the community lens. Like, we're not Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? And that doesn't mean, I'm not just talking about the monetization or the size. I'm talking the actual the core metric from a key performance indicator, right? Like, you can't apply that to a community focused project, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I think that's brilliant. Dusty says 420 holders currently. Dusty's on it. He's absolutely
nice.
And then Ray just is like going off on the 420. See, it's perfect where it's 420.
It was meant to be. Numbers are important.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, guys, so where can everybody find you? Tell me, if someone wants to jump in, they want to learn more about Eternity Complex, they want to get in on this new mint. What do they do? Where do they go?
Yeah, absolutely. Follow us on Twitter at Eternity Complex, or Complex Eternity is the tag. And we do a lot of our announcements and post links on our Twitter feed. Get in contact with us, DM, Discord as well. But it's and eternitycomplex.com, the website. You can check out the characters on there and have a look on there. The register now for the pre-mint is on there as well. But it's premint.xyz/eternitycomplex. Pretty simple.
Awesome. And now, is there a deadline for Arcturium for the pre-mint? Is like, how long do they have?
Yeah, they've got some time still, a couple of weeks. We haven't given a hard deadline yet. We were interested to see how it would get, what the response would be. But we're going to roll out a couple of the collabs, so we're giving time for that. So we're leaving the public pre-mint registration open while our collaborations roll out as well. But awesome. we'll give a hard deadline soon.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been fantastic. And Eternity Complex, I've told you this. I love the concept, and I think you guys are fucking awesome. Everybody out there, go check out Eternity Complex. Hit all of the links. Go check out the website. It's just, as they said, eternitycomplex.com. Check out the Twitter. Get on that pre-mint. Jump on it. Support a good project. With that, we will see you guys next time. Also, feel free to jump into our Discord. Usually after evening alphas, we play some games, so come hang out. Maybe we can get the guys to hang out here. And absolutely. We will see you guys on the next one. And everybody, take care. And